Hello, hello, and welcome back to For Book's Sake. I am Heather Roberts.
I am Veronica Adams, and we are 1852 Media.
We are, and today we are going to be talking about a very hot topic in the publishing world, AI. AI. And we are actually going to dive a little bit into the legal cases that are ongoing right now regarding AI. Veronica and I happen to be licensed attorneys. Disclaimer, we are not your attorney. This is not legal
Yes,
advice.
nothing we say today is legal advice.
This is our opinions
Yes.
and commentary on these public
Mhm.
complaints and issues. So, yeah, I mean, I think that this is really interesting and how it's going to affect publishing. There is an actual lawsuit from the Authors Guild,
Yes.
per my understanding.
Yes.
I read the one from the New York Times because I felt like that was really one
Mhm.
of the most, I don't know, probably one of the biggest names
Yeah.
out there right
Right.
now
Right.
who's suing.
Also, the most recent filing, I think, right? Didn't they just file their complaint back
In
at the end of
December.
December, right after Christmas? Yeah.
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 So nothing really has happened yet because I don't even think it's been 30 days since they filed. So no, answer has been filed yet to my knowledge as of the taping of this podcast. But we'll keep you in the loop. I think the allegations amongst all of them
Yes.
are pretty consistent
Yes. A lot of
and
commonalities.
a lot of commonalities.
Some very specific differences in the law and in the legal analysis that will happen in the courts, but
Right.
like the general facts of most of these cases are pretty similar.
And so, well, let's just talk about the New York Times one briefly. So, they filed in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. And that makes a difference. I think New York is a really prominent jurisdiction where a lot of people look to for precedent creating, even if it's
Yes.
not binding precedent to
Right.
your court. These are opinions that come out of that court tend to be looked at with a little bit more of a critical eye and prestige. So I think that that's important. And that's also, so the Southern District of New York is known for their that's where all of the money that's where Wall Street is. That's
Yes.
where a lot of financial crimes
Right.
happen. So
Prominent because it is the jurisdiction, the federal jurisdiction over Manhattan and I think
right.
all five boroughs of New York City, that tri-state area, if you
Yes.
will.
So it's very prominent in that
Yes.
regard because a lot of
Yes.
high profile, gosh, Heather, cases are brought there and decided
Business,
there.
finance,
Yes.
politics. I mean, just about every industry you can think of. And now here we
Right.
are with tech and publishing.
Right. And which is really interesting because when you think tech, you think California, you
Absolutely.
think,
Yeah,
maybe even Seattle, right?
for
But
sure.
you do not think New York, but
Right. Bay
the New
Area,
York,
Seattle, maybe Austin now.
yeah. But the New York Times is obviously located
Yeah.
in New York. So they are able to pull jurisdiction
Right. It's sort of a
there
home
by,
home court advantage for them in this regard.
right. And their complaints are pretty simple. It's I think, 69-page complaint, which, haha, I'm 12, but for- it's
You were only saying what we were both thinking.
exactly. But, the actual allegations are pretty simple. The allegations, they're suing Microsoft and OpenAI, and OpenAI's like conglomerate of businesses
Yes.
because they have like
Multiple.
multiple iterations of OpenAI governing different things. So they're suing Microsoft because Microsoft has a partnership with OpenAI that's
Yes.
pretty long standing, and Microsoft is created the computer infrastructure that is hosting OpenAI, that is making OpenAI's
Right.
ChatGPT
These
exist.
these artificial intelligence platforms have to exist somewhere on the web, which means someone is hosting them and someone built them. And Microsoft
Right.
happens to be the responsible party in that sense.
Correct. So that's why Microsoft's involved for
Yes.
anybody that's concerned or curious about that. And their complaints are essentially that the New York Times is a long-standing journalism. I can't speak today. Okay, Heather, let's think. The New York Times is a
Perhaps the most
very,
prominent newspaper in
yes,
all of the United States.
a very
Yes.
upstanding, thought of well newspaper that does a lot of investigative journalism.
Yes.
They do a lot of reports that have actual impact upon society,
Yes.
meaning that they have helped, make law changes. They've
Yes.
helped break scandals that have,
The queen of the fourth estate would be the gray lady in this country.
yeah,
Like you just cannot. And this sidestepping, things about ideology and bias in journalism and reporting now,
sure.
there just is not a. I would argue that the New York Times is the flagship newspaper
Yeah.
of the United States. There just isn't a more prominent or preeminent journalism outlet in our country.
And they really pride themselves on the fact that they have integrity in
Yes.
news reporting.
Sure.
And so
They're
whether
still
you
doing it old school. They've kept
yeah,
their ethics. Like it's
they
yeah.
have a whole ethics guideline. They have a style guide as to
Mhm.
how things are supposed to be written
Yes.
that is occasionally modified to make things more modern and whatnot. They go into all of that in a lawsuit. They have employees that they
Yeah.
pay. They have these employees, some of them are investigating a specific topic for years
Yes.
or months or what have
Their
you.
entire career with the Times is one particular story or one
Right.
set of stories. Yeah.
And the Times is paying them during this time in order to do that investigative journalism work. So it's not without cost. And the Times, they have a whole system of how they make money. They have a paywall system on their website
Yes.
that
Digital content.
digital content, you get a certain amount of free articles and then you have to pay. I'm sure we've all,
Most of us have probably hit a New
yeah,
York Times paywall at one point or another in our
exactly.
lives. Yeah.
Right. But that's how they're making money. And that's how they're able to stay in existence when so many newspapers have, fallen because of the rise of the internet and digital news. So they are really at the forefront, right? And they've invested a lot into making sure that they have integrity and that their brand stays their brand.
Right.
And their basic complaint is that what ChatGPT does, I'll say OpenAI because it governs all of the sort of AI brands that fall
Right.
underneath of it. What OpenAI is doing is taking their content and giving it away for free, and not well, and or sometimes charging because OpenAI has some free content that it allows users to go on. You can go on, openai.com and do ChatGPT, or you can go on Bing and do some searches. And so you can get some information for free. But they are also now charging people, $20, $30 a month for the better OpenAI
Right.
AI generators, chat generators. And Microsoft is now introducing into their software, AI components that they are now charging consumers $30 a month to access these components. And the problem is when they go to, a prompt is given, you can very easily get New York Times copyrighted material,
Literally word for word.
literally word for word, which would otherwise be behind a
It's
paywall.
in my legal opinion, perhaps the most damning lawsuit yet to be filed
Yeah.
against any of these AI companies because it is in many cases the receipts that the Times brought.
Oh, yeah.
It is word for word from articles published by and to whom the copyright is owned by the journalist
Mhm.
and the Times. Like it's
It
just
is damning.
yes,
It is.
very.
There's no, oh, well, we took a sentence here. We did it. No, it is verbatim,
Yes. Scraped straight from the
scraped
article.
straight from the article. They came with receipts.
Yeah.
And not only that, but they have evidence showing that the data that was used to train these AI modules
Mhm.
came from the New York Times. They came from many other places as well. They came from
Yes.
Wikipedia. They came from The Guardian. They came
Mhm.
from, like, there's a whole list of the top places that were
Right.
scraped, if you will, for data learning sets. But the New York Times is one of the more prominent ones there. They're
For sure.
like, I think they said that out of all of the information, out of all the data, it's over 1% of the data if from this particular module set is from the New York
The New York
Times.
Times.
Yeah.
Like that is so statistically that's
Significant.
that's mind-blowing.
It really is. When you think about it, that is actually quite statistically significant when you're thinking about how much data is being
And
shoved
all of
into
the
these
well,
learning
all of the
sets.
places on the internet where data is available, right? Like
Right.
because most stories are not exclusive to the New York Times unless
Right.
there's some sort of, breaking investigative situation, which does happen.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, a lot of reporting is done on like the AP wire, right? So
Right.
multiple outlets pick up these stories and multiple journalists are writing, multiple editors are headlining, and multiple outlets are publishing both in print and on the web roughly the same content. And yet 1% can
Yeah.
be sourced from or traced back to the New York Times.
Let me see if I can find
That is
that
incredible.
quote because I found that really
Shocking.
shocking. Hold on. Do. Almost one. But yeah, it is truly very interesting. And the issue also, so they go through like how many users they each have, and the fact that they're not linking,
Or
anything
giving
to the
attribution
New
in
York
any way, shape,
Times.
or form. Right.
Right. Like if you otherwise searched on Google for something, you'd be linked to
Sure.
the New York Times article, right? Okay. There it is. As part of their web text 2. Okay, web text 2 consists of, it's one of the data sets. This gets really technical. I don't want to get technical. But web text 2 was weighted 22% in the training mix for GPT-3, and Times content accounts for 1.23% of all sources listed in Open Web Text 2. So that's the exact
Holy
quote.
shit.
Yeah. Which OpenAI describes web text 2 as a quote unquote high quality data set that is, quote, an expanded version of the web text data set collected by scraping links over a longer period of time, end quote. So they look at it as a high value
Right.
data set,
Right.
which obviously it is because it's been curated by the New York Times.
Clearly.
The other issue that the New York Times has is that it will, I didn't actually know this term. So apparently, you know how like sometimes a AI module will make things up?
Yes.
That is apparently called a hallucination. Which, yeah, exactly. The New York Times, they're like, it might be called a hallucination, but essentially it's misinformation. That's what it is. So they will, they plugged in certain links of theirs, New York Times,
Just
and
anything
they,
they can do to anthropomorphize this technology, right? Like
right.
humans have hallucinations, and mammals have hallucinations. Like,
Yeah.
hmm, interesting.
So sometimes the AI will get it wrong and they'll just make shit up. That's what a hallucination is, where they just make shit up. So the New York Times also found instances where they would say, like, there was an article that they put in about, like, I don't know, the top 15 healthiest, blah, 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 right? And the prompt was, can you summarize the top 15 healthiest from this New York Times article? And it spits out names of like the healthiest foods that are, you would think as a user, are what was named in the article. Not true. It just made shit up. It also, they asked if they could link to New York Times articles about COVID-19, for
Yeah.
example, and the AI module spit out a bunch of links that are false links. They don't exist. Those articles don't exist. The names of the articles don't exist. The New York Times never wrote those articles. So the New York Times is like, that is also a problem. So not only are you taking our information and stealing it, but you're
You're
now
attributing
also
this information to
attributing,
us.
yes, you're attributing things to us that we never said, which is a major problem because we have integrity. We have this reputation in the industry that we are, great and thorough and all of these things that we've already talked about. So, yeah, it's a really, really damning complaint.
What a can of worms. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, it's just a big old mess,
And
for lack of a more eloquent way to put it.
the AP actually created a deal with OpenAI. They
Mhm.
have some sort of a partnership deal, which I would assume includes some type of attribution and or
Yes.
royalty payments
Right.
for their material. And the New York Times said that they tried to work.
I had seen that in some of the early reporting on the lawsuit, that they reached out to OpenAI and Microsoft and tried to negotiate something like back in the spring
Yeah,
of 2023, before it became obvious that they were going to have to take legal action. And there was absolutely no movement between the parties at all on how the Times's
right.
copyrights and reputation could be protected while Microsoft and OpenAI continued to use the data that they'd already basically
Stolen.
stolen.
Let's
Yeah.
be honest.
Yeah,
Stolen. So, I mean, this is going to have massive ramifications
for sure.
because if this is found to be copyright infringement, which it is, spoiler alert. I mean, what else is it? How can you say it's not?
Judge Roberts presiding.
Yeah, I mean, I am very interested to see the response on this
Yes.
and the legal, like,
Well, so it's interesting because some of the other cases, the older cases that involve like graphics and images,
yeah,
some of those have not been received nearly as favorably as the issues surrounding the written word, right? So,
right.
journalism, the Authors Guild has filed a lawsuit as well, I believe, on behalf of basically the entire network, joined by several very prominent authors.
Hmm.
George R. Martin, I want to say,
I think so. Yeah.
James Patterson, maybe? I can't remember. Sarah Silverman has also filed a lawsuit on behalf of actors and screenwriters, because essentially what these companies have been doing, and I say companies with a broad brush here because it's
Right.
multiple, it's not just OpenAI.
With
John
these
Grisham.
AI
Not James
companies.
Patterson.
Yeah,
John
John
Grisham.
Grisham. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, not James Patterson, John Grisham. Jodi Picoult too is part of that lawsuit. They're essentially using torrent websites where screenplays and books and other published works are pirated
Mm,
to build their data sets.
that's lovely.
Yeah, Sarah Silverman's lawsuit, I believe, includes Meta
Mm,
as a defendant. Their Llama program, which is very similar to some of the text stuff that ChatGPT and Bard do, is alleged to have stolen, I mean, just outright stolen from these torrent websites and
yeah.
used that content to build their data sets. I believe OpenAI is the defendant in the Authors Guild lawsuit, if I'm not mistaken. Discovered because an author was playing around with it when it first launched and asked for a poem to be written about a character he created. And the
Yeah.
amount of detail in the poem about the character himself was, there was just too much detail. It
There
was
was no way they could have known that but for have stolen their material.
right. The
Yeah.
prompt that was given to ChatGPT was not as extensive as the amount of content ChatGPT spit back out about the
Mhm.
character.
Yeah.
accurately.
Right.
So the book or a bunch of information about the book had to be in ChatGPT's data set for producing
Right.
that poem.
And it's true. I mean, they have 100% done this. I've not seen anyone come out and say, "Oh no, we got it all legally." Because you can't say
Yeah.
that because you didn't.
Well, the process of procuring every license you could possibly need to have done
Oh my
this
god.
legally would be
It's
so time consuming
right. It would
and
be
so
so onerous.
costly.
Yeah.
They would have this is a clear case example of the tech world asking for forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
going to be super expensive for them when it's over with.
It really is. Because if you think about just just thinking about damages, right? Because that's where my mind always goes with a lawsuit,
Yeah,
right? Like, what are the
absolutely.
damages?
Absolutely.
And the New York Times themselves, they're talking about how there was 100 to 150 million users of just OpenAI
Hmm.
when it first launched. That could have changed. Now we could be up in the 200 million, what have you. And if you extrapolate the fact that people are now getting their information there and not
Yeah,
the New York Times website, what type of lost revenue are is the New York Times unable to receive?
right.
Plus potentially reputation damage from the fact that they're now giving misinformation that's attributed to the New York
Mhm.
Times. There's just so many pieces here that have damage components to it
For sure.
that could be really expensive,
Hmm.
really expensive. And the fact that Microsoft has really hitched its wagon wheel to OpenAI, I don't know how they would be able to, you know, slither their way out of this lawsuit because there's some serious.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry about that. That was a notification. Thought I turned this off. That they have some quotes in there that are really damning. That really talk about how they've hitched their wagon wheel to
Right.
OpenAI, and the fact they can't walk those back now. That's not a walk. Also, it's true. So, you know,
Right.
it's going to be very hurtful financially if the New York Times and these other
Hmm.
places win these lawsuits. And I think that some of these other courts might be waiting to see, direction wise. I know they say, like, oh, we look at each case on its merits. Of course you do, but you also want to see what the other guy does,
Of course.
you know.
Of course.
So,
There, for appellate judges, there's always that fear. Not, I'm sure that not all of them carry this fear, but
sure.
of being overturned on appeal, right? Like
Yeah.
if there's a judge who can say no, you decided wrong somewhere above you, you obviously want to avoid that, right?
They like their stats to be
Of
good.
course they do.
Of course they
Of
do.
course they do.
They're human.
Well, and I think this is a situation where SCOTUS is going to have to weigh in eventually, one way
Oh,
or the other.
100%.
The
100%.
New York Times case, I can't for the life of me see how it would get there based on the facts that we know that are public
Yeah.
at this point. But I suppose it's possible that Microsoft or OpenAI could chase it all the way up if they
Yeah.
don't prevail in the lower courts.
I'm just oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, please go ahead.
What interests me is that OpenAI was able to create these partnership deals with some other places, right?
Yes.
So the fact that the New York Times couldn't get a licensing deal with OpenAI really makes me question the terms of the other licensing deals.
Right.
What were these other places willing to settle for? Because I- it's got to be terrible. It's got to be really bad terms because I don't think the New York Times is overly greedy or anything like that. They probably just wanted to be paid appropriately for the use of their material.
Right.
I'm just wondering what was the sticking point here?
How did these two companies fail to come to terms? Like what was the thing that the Times required that OpenAI or Microsoft said absolutely no to?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I will say, so OpenAI has res- responded to the complaint on their blog. I didn't mention that. I meant that they haven't actually filed an answer, like an actual legal document. They put on,
They've addressed it for PR purposes, but they have not
yes.
responded legally in the court of law.
And they have said, we support journalism, partner with news organizations, and believe the New York Times lawsuit is without merit. So, and then they have a whole little breakdown, and the New York Times is not telling the full story. Oh, okay.
This
And
is
they
an out.
claim that regurgitation is a rare bug that they are working to drive to zero. No, no, no.
We have
I just
here
that you
a complete disconnect from the society we have built up to this point and the civil laws that govern the protection of intellectual property. Long standing, right? Like
Mhm.
litigated over generations in multiple cases since we became a country in the late 18th century. And these tech bros who think that the future is all that matters and that, the rules and regulations can be bent or ignored, or we can just, progress for the sake of progress, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just such a disconnect between two completely different corners of our society. And I, listen, I don't want to sound like a grandmother here. I'm all for progress. And if
I am
AI
too.
has something to add to our culture and to make our lives easier, then by all means, we should carefully unleash it and start utilizing it where it can help us.
Yes.
But this is just a cash grab that hurts a bunch of people
I
who
think
have legal rights to
yeah.
not be violated this way.
So I think what's most concerning is the data set use
Yeah,
and the fact that it's very clear that the data sets were scraped here
all
using
stolen content, all
all
stolen
stolen
content.
content, all copyrighted content. I mean, the New York Times, that I think this is really important because a lot of journalists, online journalists, people that just post on the internet or what have you, maybe even some very prominent blogs, may not copyright every single one of their articles. They may not. They probably don't. The New York Times, though, does. So they actually hold the copyright to their articles that they publish. And that is a real distinct difference here between potentially a lot of other places that are doing things like this. I think the publishing lawsuit, the Authors Guild one, I would say that they also likely hold the copyrights too. That is a very common practice when you publish a
Yes.
book, you file a copyright.
Yes.
If you don't do that already, authors, you should. But for reasons just like this, it gives you that higher legal standing. Do you still own the copyright to it without filing
Of course
a
you do.
copyright? Of course you do, but courts look at it a little bit differently. So their response, though, I knew their response was going to be fair use. I'm really interested to see how they frame this legally, though, because I can read their PR response, right? Which is their little blog thing, and it basically breaks down into we view this lawsuit as an opportunity to clarify our business, our intent, and how we build our technology.
Okay, but fair use. And
Yeah,
I don't know how into the weeds you want to go legally on this, but like most of the New York Times situation flies so far afield of the
right.
four principles of the fair use doctrine that it's almost insulting that they would
Yeah,
claim it, you know?
yeah,
Like find some other way to walk this back, but don't just regurgitate the law and claim that it's like
right.
it's frustrating. It's super frustrating. And
They and they say that they provide an opt out because it's the right thing to do. I don't think that the New York Times was ever given an option to opt out.
why weren't they opted out after your discussions with them dissolved in the spring
Right.
of 2023? Like
Yeah.
why weren't they opted out then?
what do they say about that? They say that they were surprised by the lawsuit. Hold on, where is that little thing? It's very amusing. Oh, our discussions with the New York Times had appeared to be progressing constructively through our last communication on December 19th. The negotiations focused on a high value partnership around real time display with attribution in ChatGPT, in which the New York Times would gain a new way to connect with their existing and new readers, and our users would gain access to their reporting. They already have access to your reporting. So, anyway, um, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're okay. We had explained to the New
But
York Times that
that news reporting is such a fundamental, like that's the foundation of their fair use claim here, right? Like
right.
it has to be, because if they can't stand on that, they've done nothing else with the data that could be considered fair use.
They say that we had explained to the New York Times that, like any single source, their content didn't meaningfully contribute to the training of our existing models and also wouldn't be sufficiently impactful for future training. I find that hard to believe. That is a sentence. Their lawsuit on December 27th, which we learned about by reading the New York Times, came as a surprise and disappointment to us. Along
Oh,
the way,
please. You have a
yeah,
registered agent on Fifth Avenue somewhere. You knew about
you
it.
knew.
Get out
Along
of
the
here.
way, they had mentioned seeing some regurgitation of their content, but repeatedly refused to share any examples, despite our commitment to investigate and fix issues. We've demonstrated how seriously we treat this as a priority, such as in July when we took down a ChatGPT feature immediately after we learned it could reproduce real time content in unattended ways. They're saying that the regurgitations the New York Times induced appear to be from years old articles that have proliferated on multiple third party websites. It seems that they intentionally manipulated prompts, blah 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 blah. So that's where it's going to be. That they're cherry picking examples. That's their reply. However, that still does not get away from the fact
Did you
that they
take their content
used the
and use it
data.
without
Right.
compensating them for it?
So
Did you take the content
I feel
and
like
use it and
yeah,
not compensate them for it? Like, it's a
right.
simple theft claim here, OpenAI. Come
This
on
is
now.
we're arguing about the weeds here when we should be looking at the forest. Like that's what
The
their response is going to
like
be.
their response is tantamount to the New York Times was asking for it by wearing that short skirt and putting those
Yeah,
articles up on third party platforms. Like,
correct.
get out of here with that nonsense in the
Yeah,
year 2024.
it's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. And oh my god. But I have to wonder again like what the sticking point was that if they were in negotiations on December 19th and
Hmm.
they felt for whatever reason that things were not progressing as they needed to be. So there's a couple reasons why you would file a lawsuit while you're in the middle of negotiations, right?
Yes,
One is that a statute of limitations is starting
about
to
to run.
run.
Yeah.
So that could be potentially there
Yes.
could be
You
some
you
key
filed a
thing.
complaint to prevent your claim from being time barred, because if you don't
Yep.
get it in on time, it's gone forever.
Yeah. So I don't know if maybe they have an article or something. They have a smoking gun, if you will. Maybe there was a statute that was going to be running. Maybe I don't know. I don't know.
Or maybe they'd just been doing it for 9 months and they were sick and tired of the BS and they decided that it was time to let the courts help them move things forward,
Yes.
because there was not going to be a private resolution between the parties. Like, if
That's another
you've ever
reason.
had a disagreement with
Yeah.
another human being, you know that that's a possibility. Like, sometimes you just
Negotiations can
cannot
yeah.
compromise.
Negotiations could run on for 2 years and
Yeah.
still have no resolution, and the courts
Yeah.
tend to help speed things along.
Ask any family law attorney, they will
Yeah.
tell you.
Right. So
Sometimes you just have to file.
yeah, sometimes you just have to file and let the negotiations continue through the legal process.
Exactly.
I have a feeling that that's probably more likely that if
Mhm.
they were in negotiations for months and didn't feel that they were getting any closer to a real resolution,
Yes.
that they finally said, okay, we're just going to file and we'll continue the negotiations then.
Right.
I don't necessarily because I feel like the copyright they shouldn't be running. It's not like the copyrights are running out. You know what I mean? You can
Mhm.
refile, you can revive.
Yes.
So I don't really think the statute issue. is relevant here. But who knows? I mean, could something I haven't seen before.
Right.
I also find it a little bit hard to believe that no examples were given of regurgitation during the negotiation process.
Convenient, right?
Yeah. I I I mean, I find that interesting.
My best guess, completely uneducated,
Right.
right?
This is all speculation. This is
Eh,
all just us
my
chatting.
best guess is that the New York Times wanted too much money and also too many changes to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And between both demands, OpenAI and Microsoft are like, thanks, but no thanks.
I think also the way that my brain is going is that they wanted some type of compensation for the current use of their information,
Yes.
the past use of their
The
information.
Pandora's box that's already open.
Yes. The
Yeah.
one where I laughed and said, like, you're already using my stolen data.
Right.
That's like somebody stealing your car and then saying, "Oh, well, I'll pay you for the use of it going forward."
Yeah.
And you're like, "You've had it for 2 years."
Right.
Like, I've been,
I want to be
paying.
compensated for the loss of use and you're taking it for the last 2 years. Like
Right. And they're like, "Nah, we're just going to go forward with it. We're going to forget about that." Nah, dude. That's not how that works.
yeah.
That has to be some type of
I'll let a
sticking
judge
point
or a
there.
jury do the math on that if I have to. Like,
Right.
because it's pretty cut and dry.
It is pretty cut and dry. So, but yeah, they put up this blog post, by the way, on January 8th. So I'm not like remiss too much in too many days behind and seeing it, but also they haven't actually filed a reply in the legal sense.
Yeah.
It's not due yet. So I wouldn't expect them to have
Mhm.
replied.
Oh, I fully expect it won't even be a reply. It'll be a motion to dismiss the lawsuit first. Then they'll
Then
file
they'll
an
file.
answer
Yeah,
when the court
exactly.
orders them to.
Right. So I don't
What
see
I'd do.
this. Yeah, but I don't see this happening in a motion to dismiss. I don't see this.
No, but they have to try.
Of course, they have to try because they're lawyers and that's what you do. But yeah, there's no way we're going to see anything substantive from them for a
For a
little
while.
while.
Yeah.
I think that their motion to dismiss is going to have a lot of the themes that are in this blog post,
Mhm.
which, strategically speaking, is not very smart, I don't think, to put out to let the New York Times know what you're thinking until it's necessary for them to know what you're
Yeah.
thinking. That's
Well,
just from a legal strategy point of view.
but there've been a lot of missteps here in terms of like it I
Yeah.
almost feel like nobody even consulted legal. They were like, "Oh my god, let's just build our own AI platform." And then they did it without any sort of thought about the complications or the repercussions.
yeah.
I mean, some of the other lawsuits that are open are just they're almost comical, right? In terms of some of the facts. Like Getty Images
Yeah.
is the plaintiff in one case, and they have as part of their claims something that has really upset them is the brand dilution and
Yeah.
the reputation besmirching that comes from some of these images that get created when their licensed photos get stolen and worked into some of these composite images that AI is generating,
Yeah.
especially when, and this is the kicker, the Getty Images watermark is left on the Getty images that are stolen. And so you
Yeah.
have these composite AI images out there in the ether that people are posting, on social and using God only knows where for whatever purposes. And it's like whatever the image is, there's a portion of it, and you can literally see the Getty Images watermark on it.
Right. Which is obviously not a Getty image.
Right, but it's just one section of the composite, right? Like
Right.
it's I don't know, some dude's six pack abs or something. I don't know, or like the beach background behind a mermaid or something, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
and the consumer confusion that results when somebody who perhaps uses Getty Images, licenses their photos for any purpose, editorial use, print
Yeah.
use. In our world, it wouldn't be out of the question for somebody to go pay for a Getty license to use a book cover, to do a book cover or something like that, right?
Right.
Or, you know, any sort of marketing art,
This is
advertising, graphics. And the damages to Getty's reputation as a business
oh yeah.
when their branding is showing up out there on these monstrosities that are computer generated.
It's terrible.
Uh-huh.
I think there's a couple more things to mention. One being that apparently I'm looking through some more information,
Yeah.
and I have found that OpenAI has offered some media firms as little as between 1 million and 5 million annually to license news articles for use in training its large language
Get
models.
the fuck out of here. Get the like
So that we were just talking about, like I was asking what were the negotiations. That
this
would
isn't Don Draper's internet. It's 2024. Gas is $3 a gallon. You're giving people $1 million?
that's it.
You
Can you
can't retire on
imagine?
$1 million.
Can you imagine OpenAI offering the New York Times $1 million a year for its
A,
data?
a billion maybe, but not a
Yeah,
million.
I would laugh in their face, which is also probably why the lawsuit was filed. Because if that's where their negotiations were at, I can imagine they were very, very far apart.
I have no words.
Yeah,
Like
I found that nugget and I was like, oh, I gotta update this because that's insane.
suddenly seeing how negotiations fell apart. Like
Yeah, I see it now.
crystal clear.
The other thing that I find interesting is their whole regurgitation. I'm thinking about this more as we're
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
They're talking about how, oh well, I'm just using the other articles that the language module is just using other information I found on the internet, and they're the ones that stole your data, right? And that took it from behind the paywall.
Right.
That doesn't make it right, my friend. Like it doesn't that so you stole stolen data and you're using that as your defense?
You can't have your kidney back because I didn't. I bought it from somebody who did the stealing from you. Not,
Right.
like what?
I stole it from the guy who stole it from you.
I bought it from the guy who stole it from you.
Well, or that.
Doesn't matter. It's still stolen.
It's still
Like,
stolen.
we have some ethical issues in the
I
tech
mean,
world, y'all. We have some like tech needs an ethics
they need ethics. But
period.
yeah. Like that doesn't
Period.
absolve you of liability by saying that your data modules found it somewhere else on the internet from somebody else who
Yeah.
stole it from you.
Right. Well, and that's essentially what happened allegedly what happened in the case where Meta is the defendant is that they acquired the data legally or otherwise
Right.
from places where the data is collected illegally by individual internet users
Yeah.
who upload pirated films, books, everything.
So you can't have other minions, if you will, out doing your
Mhm.
dirty work for you and then take it from them and say,
Nope.
oh, it's all good. I don't know where I got it from. Or, like that's not how this works. That's
At
just
least
a
that's not how it's supposed to
batshit.
work.
That I can't imagine that's going to make it into the final argument because that is a batshit legal theory that is not
Mhm.
that's going to drop like a lead balloon.
I don't know. There's some pretty crazy legal arguments being made out
Oh,
there in the
well,
public eye these days.
I know. Apparently, I feel some days like my law degree means nothing because you can just say anything
Just
these
pull it
days.
down off the wall and
Yeah,
light it on fire.
it just means shit these days. It's like what? Some of these arguments I hear
Yeah, I know.
in the
And
news.
that's to say nothing of all the times I've wanted to like burn it myself
Well,
because
yeah.
for a whole host of reasons, everything from making a murderer to like my own
Oh
personal
my god.
frustrations practicing law. But yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just wild. Just
Mhm.
wild. So, if that's the precursor, if that's the teaser we just received,
Right.
oh god. I wow. Wow.
Yeah.
There's just so much.
It's interesting. And I don't know what your conversations have been like with authors lately, but I have had more and more authors approach me to let me know that they, generally speaking, in our partnerships with us, would prefer if I just did not rely on AI for anything related to their brands because they don't
Yeah.
want to be associated with or involved in it. And for reasons like this, I completely understand.
Right. And I think the problem right now is that you don't know. It's very hard to tell what's ethical and what's not ethical.
Sure.
I
We're
think
we're
that's
sort
the
of
issue.
setting that precedent now and establishing those standards, which maybe we should have done preventatively before we launched the applications, but here we are,
Here we
guys.
are. And I've had some conversations with clients, and I've assured them. I mean, we do not use AI in any substantive way,
Mhm,
substantive way that would affect their brands. Like, so if we're looking for an image, right, to
mhm.
use as a graphic, I'm not looking for an AI image. I'm not creating an image
I
using
never use an
AI.
image that I haven't already licensed or that the author
Right.
hasn't already licensed in some capacity, period.
Correct. And I'm, same way with, other uses
Yeah.
of AI. I say not in every, so I use like predictive text or
Yeah.
predictive email or things like that. That is AI, friends. That is AI. We're
I
just
will
very used
sometimes
to it.
I will sometimes take a blurb and then let Facebook's ad manager
Yeah.
text predictor thing like suggest alternate ways to like get people to click on an ad using your blurb, but beyond
The
that,
beyond that, no. No.
very
Because
limited uses.
right. And so you have to be careful. You have to make sure that what you're using is appropriate.
Yep.
And
As a
there's
creator
just
yourself, you need to be careful not to hurt other creators by taking
right.
things that came to you through those black market back channels. Like,
There's
I
a
paid
lot
for it. I just paid somebody who stole it.
yeah. There's a lot of murky area with AI though.
For sure.
And I'm going to talk about something that I think is very murky right now that I don't know, let's talk this out.
Yeah.
So, AI narration. There's a
Yeah.
whole hubbub about AI narration.
Just had a conversation about it on Friday.
And I am I am not in as much hate about AI narration as other forms of AI.
Yeah.
Simply because you are supplying the data set to be used,
Mhm.
and then the AI is then taking your data that you submitted
And performing it.
and performing it. Are they performing it well? No, probably not. Will it get better? Probably. But that already exists in so many different ways
Mhm.
that are unobjectional. Like, people don't object to those ways. But somehow, because we put AI in front of it, it's now become very hot topic. I think that that narrators, like human narrators, are always going to do the best job because you can 100% not, get that human feel to a
Yeah.
story that a human gives,
Yeah.
no matter the best AI narration. So I don't think that that's necessarily the same. I don't know. I don't see it in the same way as I do other forms of AI because you are supplying the data.
Right.
It is your data that you're supplying. And the question is, where do they get their voices from? But there's a lot of legal and ethical ways that the voices have been obtained over
Okay.
the years.
And that's a really
Amazon,
good
for example,
yeah,
has,
that's a good
yeah.
point. If you can be certain that the voice itself has been generated in an ethical way and that the human beings who contributed to the creation of that were compensated fairly, there
or at least
probably
signed a
really isn't.
waiver, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But there's an appropriate license agreement in place and that contractually everybody came to terms and made fully informed decisions about their contributions, right? And their
Hmm.
compensation or lack of compensation for those contributions, depending on what the agreement says. Like, in a situation where all the humans are fully informed and nobody has been stolen from, you're probably right. It's probably not really an issue ethically or morally. But there is also, and this is something I love about the little corner of the indie publishing world that we inhabit in Romance Landia,
Yeah.
a very pro human creation mentality for the most part. I would say the
Yeah.
majority of folks in Romance Landia are just very much pro the human touch, right?
Absolutely.
And I just think that for some authors it will never be the right move. For some authors it'll
Right.
be a perfectly valid choice, right? And for others it just is not something that they can do.
Yeah. I think that that's one of those things that is going to have to be decided, per
Mhm.
your brand.
Yep.
And I don't think that you should be blacklisted or
Right.
whatever. Listen, I don't think you should be, thrown on as a pariah in the
Mhm.
industry if you choose to use AI narration, if it's been done, like we said, ethically,
Right.
and appropriately. Because I also think, I don't know, I think it's a this is okay. I think it comes from a place of privilege for
Mm.
some authors to say, "Oh, just wait until you have the money to be able to make
That's
AI to be able to make human narration."
that's
I don't
that's
think you
girl boss gatekeeping bullshit right there is what
yeah.
that is. That's
Narr
wait until you are at a completely different level in your
right.
career to try and progress and build something in the audio world.
Audiobooks are insanely expensive to produce
Yes, they
by
are.
human voice. And so if there is a cheaper alternative, albeit not as good, but if there is an alternative that allows an author to create, to get their books out there in a different format, and as long as it's done ethically, this is we're always talking about ethics here, friends.
For sure.
But I haven't seen examples. I haven't seen where, different AI narration programs have stolen voices. Now, if
Right.
you're getting a book and you're getting it like if the AI narration is going to put it in some celebrity's voice, right? Like that's obviously stolen. That's not
Mhm.
okay. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about just a generic, voice that of which there are plenty of choose from already that already exist
Yeah.
that are fine to use. So I don't know. There's a whole gatekeeping element to it. There's a place of privilege
Mhm.
element
For sure.
to it that really, blocks off a whole group of people from even being able to enter into audiobooks.
Mhm.
And then I think about it from a consumer perspective, a reader side, where there's a whole group of people who are disabled and they're already using voice to text or text to voice. Yeah.
Right.
On their Amazon Kindles. Is that not AI or narration? I mean, it's done poorly. This will be done a little bit better. See what I'm
You're not
saying? Like,
you're not no,
where's
you're
the
not wrong.
line?
You're not
Where's the
wrong. A
line?
computer is literally reading the words for them. Like, you're right.
Yes. The computer is reading the words to them so that they can now access this book
Mhm.
that they otherwise wouldn't have had
Yeah,
access to.
absolutely.
And so if it's just done in the format that it's supposed to be, I bet it'd be a little less clunky for them,
For sure. For
experience
sure.
wise.
Well, and if nothing else, then AI hopefully provides sooner rather than later vast improvements on the experience for visually impaired readers, right?
Right.
And you're absolutely correct. Opens a potentially much more affordable avenue for authors to publish
Right.
audio versions of all of their books.
And are they going to be done well? Again, maybe not. They're not going to be the human element. You're
Right.
going to miss the human element.
Right.
But if that's not the point, if that's not what you care about, then and you're fine accepting a lesser, quality
Mhm.
title. I do think that it should be easier for consumers though to be able to identify what is AI narration and what is a human voice narration
100%.
title. That
100%.
needs to be made super clear because a reader should be able to understand what they're getting.
Absolutely. As a consumer, I want to know if I'm supporting an artist or if I'm supporting
Yeah.
a, an assembly line production situation.
Right. Or and also for my experience level, I need to have
Sure.
my expectations calibrated when I'm going into
Well,
this.
there's a reason that certain narrators are in such high demand because their
Correct.
individual performances are just so stellar. They've set themselves out apart from all of the other available narrators out there because they perform so well and they are so good at what they do,
Right.
you know? And I can see when an audiobook has been narrated by one of those voice actors.
Right. And I
Be
enjoy
nice
it. I enjoy it
be
more.
nice to know when considering making a purchase if this one's being voice acted by AI.
Right. That I think is super important and
Mhm.
is not currently being done. So I
Yeah,
think that that should be definitely adjusted.
right. But the stigma
But
around using AI is going to have to collectively be addressed in order for authors to start voluntarily doing that.
right.
Or audio platforms are going to have to mandate it, that you have to disclose it. And I
I
doubt that
yeah.
they will.
I doubt that they will too. It's just I feel like people are saying like all AI is bad forever and
Mhm.
ever amen. And I just want to be clear that that's not what either of us are saying.
Yeah.
There are going to be uses for this technology that
Mhm.
are wonderful and they can be fantastic for the publishing industry, for society at large,
Yes.
but it there need to be regulations on it.
Yeah.
It's like, when cars first came about, like no, for real. You didn't have to have a license. There were no requirements. There were
Right.
no street
Safety
rules. There were
no
no
safety
safety.
mechanisms within or without the cars themselves.
Right. And a lot of people died because there was no drinking and driving
Yeah.
regulations. There was
Yeah.
nothing. So people just literally got into these death machines
Well, hell,
and drove all over the place.
if you
That's
ask
where we're at
anybody
now.
if you ask anybody who is a little bit conservative what they think of Ralph Nader, you're going to get an earful of the 70s and seatbelts and,
Right.
my freedoms. But like seatbelts save lives.
Seatbelts save lives. And regulations on AI are going to save artists
Yeah,
and
100%.
humans. And that's what we need. We need to ensure that all AI creation is done ethically and legally.
Well,
That's all.
that's what we need to be doing, yes. But will we? I have a lot of doubts
I have a
because the
lot of doubt.
power in this particular situation, the power and the money is concentrated on the tech side of the scales. And
Yeah. I also,
all of the really moneyed interests who can lobby our politicians are the people who are stealing from others
yeah.
and just having a heyday with their new tech pets.
So, well, to talk about the money briefly for a second,
Yes.
because we've been
Yes, yes,
chatting about
yes.
this for an hour now. If you're
Oh
still
my
with
god, if you're
us,
still with us.
thank you. But OpenAI was originally funded with $1 billion from, you know, the Elon Musk was one of them,
With a B, not an
a
M.
B, a B,
Gee, did it really take that much?
$1 billion. And it was created initially as a nonprofit. It was Those were donated funds to a nonprofit from the billionaires and millionaires of the world, right? The uber
Yes.
wealthy,
Yes.
in order to create this venture for the good of society. Okay, that's what it was initially touted as, and then that was
What
short lived.
kind of Bruce Wayne Batman shit is
It
this?
truly
Like,
is. That like literally within like 2 years of OpenAI's creation, that nonprofit shenanery was dropped and they became a for-profit company and started going to different funding rounds with
I
investors who expected a return.
I always appreciate when the masks come off and we
Oh
can
yeah.
actually get down to business about what our motivations really are because
Yeah. It took like 2 years. Right. So we need to, I think that motivations are part of the discussion here for sure. That we can say that this was all altruistic to help society. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. You
okay.
did this as a tax write off.
110%.
He just has
And
a
then
tax
once you
write-off.
got the write-offs,
Yeah.
you decided to switch gears and go for profit with
And
it.
go for profit.
Absolutely. The other problem we're going to have with all of this is the fact that our current leadership across the board, entirely too old to even
Oh,
understand
God.
this technology, never mind
Yep.
guide us through how to safely regulate it for our society.
Oh, that Congress hearing about Facebook ads. I was pounding my head into the table. I could not even. The TikTok hearing.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it was painful.
Yeah.
Painful to watch.
We're not done having those conversations as a
No.
society. We are
No.
not, because there are people out there who would do whatever it takes to limit some of this stuff. And there are people out there who would do whatever it takes to continue lining their pockets with donations from the companies
Yeah.
who we do need to maybe regulate a little bit.
The regulation is not necessarily a bad thing. Overregulation is a bad thing. But
Yeah.
there is a balance there. There's a lovely balance that allows for the creativity to flow and also keeps people safe and livelihoods intact,
Right.
and that's the whole goal
Right.
for society. That's
Yeah.
not I wouldn't say that's the goal for the OpenAI folks.
No.
I wouldn't say. Or people
Not,
like them.
not even a little bit. No.
Not even a little bit. No.
No. But people who don't understand tech have no business making the rules about it.
Oh God, just for that goes for everything.
Not 100%. 100%.
I mean, if you
And
don't understand it,
that's all sides of the aisle. That's left, middle, and right. Like,
yeah.
there's just too many.
Yeah, we're gonna get on our high horse now.
Listen, I love me some Silent Generation. My dad is one. He's 80 years old, but he and his contemporaries have no business being leaders in this country anymore. None of them.
Yeah.
Period.
We need
Mandatory
people.
retirements for all.
I
Sorry, that's a different podcast.
It's a different podcast. But it does touch on the topic that we're talking about for sure, because when people are making the rules and thus the regulations that I'm discussing we need,
Yeah.
I would love for regulations to be made, but the people that are going to be making them don't understand the technology.
Right.
They wouldn't even understand this podcast that we just chatted about, that you
Yes.
guys, that the people listening, I hope understand and
Right.
understand. So you should feel smarter than your congressperson, because you probably are.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
And on that high note, I think that we've talked about this enough for now. But we'll keep bringing back updates about AI and what's happening in these lawsuits, because these are important things to talk about. They affect us as a society. They affect the publishing industry.
For sure.
And they're going to affect all of us in our daily lives.
Well, and depending on whether they settle or they end up going to juries or, judges for final arbitration and decision making, a lot of what will happen next in terms of what you have access to and your ability to utilize AI in your businesses will probably be impacted by these decisions in one way, shape, or another.
Exactly. So keep it here for more AI news. So
an occasional political ranting.
Yeah, right. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.